Is Dragonflight releasing too soon, Michael?
Is it too soon? I don't fucking know. no one knows, right? But is it releasing too soon? There's certainly a strong argument for yes. There is also a counter argument too.
Of course.
I suppose that's the thing. Right, to get you caught up to date with the story. Pre-orders went up. A little disclaimer was there saying it'll be available on or before December 31st, 2022, which is a funny little thing because almost everyone had suspected 2023. The reasons why are simple enough. They've generally just been behind on everything. I think people, we're almost trying to manage their own expectations by just kind of going as conservative as possible. Number one, because people want them to have the time to make sure this expansion is really a winner. Because, like, even though Shadowlands was delayed, it clearly could have done with more time in the oven. So it's like a mixture of that and trying to set reasonable expectations. And then suddenly we find out I look at this date and what I think is first week of December, last week of November. I think it's extremely unlikely you're going anywhere closer to the end of December. That is just not a time that companies release games because people, they're already pretty taxed on, not only on money, but also on time, because getting ready for holidays is a bitch. It is a lot of work.
It also gives them a pretty kind of, something I think they probably appreciated when it came to my microphone being in the right place would help. When it came to there we go. When it came to Castle Nathir releasing, they had a pretty big buffer window there to actually kind of test that internally or, literally just wait. Instead of going, okay, we need everything to be perfect. They had a decent amount of time to go, hey, we can fix Shadowlands launch issues without them running into, oh shit, the raid has actually been completely destroyed as a result of this. So I imagine I think they probably enjoyed it. And if possible, they'll aim for the same thing again, where it's just they're buying themselves a little bit of time. And if you have an expansion that's fairly heavy in terms of, like Shadowlands was, very heavy in terms of content that you can kind of do at launch and loads of different secrets and stuff to find, then I think that ends up leading for a better experience than people going, oh, raid, fuck, run, sprint, full speed.
Yeah, I think Christmas raiding would suck. That is not something people want. It's also something Blizzard have said in the past, generally speaking, they also really do not want that. Yeah. Right, so that's basically that. That's my expectation for a release date. Looking at the community reactions then, here's Towley's poll.
Yes.
Right, most people thinking Q1 delay announcement is likely. Right, the very few people thinking April 11th, and plenty of people thinking legit. Then Flex, just don't learn from the past. Lots of talk about delays. Dragonflight is not even an alpha yet. By the way, this was a joke from Nagura, but the idea, it's not even alpha, and wow, that's pretty close. And then also, it's all $10 more, but we'll talk about that later.
So to kind of address the whole learn from the past thing that Flex said, that's something that we're actually fairly good at as humans, as people, right? We go, learn from the past. But we're actually, as far as I'm aware, fairly bad at taking multiple data points in the past.
We're awful.
Especially when they're different. If there's all the same data point, we'll learn. But we are based on comparison in terms of the last thing we remember. That's kind of almost everything in the body is about hotter, colder, more dopamine, less dopamine, that kind of stuff. And, wetter, drier, I don't know how that works for, I guess it's a binary state, but that idea of just the last thing that happened and is what we think about now. So we do have to look a little bit into the data to see.
We're very relative.
Yeah, relative to the last thing. So is there anything to learn from here? Was Shadowlands any different in terms of, there's a couple things internally, but was Shadowlands especially did get a delay. Was there anything wrong with that? Was there anything wrong with Legion as an example?
The problem is Shadowlands wasn't well designed.
Yeah.
That was the real problem.
Yeah.
And I don't think any delay would have fixed that.
Yeah, it was a fundamental, you build on a rocky foundation, you're not going to get.
Yeah, it's like we won the battle over conduits. Remember when conduits were going to be like gems and be destroyed? They were going to be a consumable resource. Yeah. So we won the battle on conduits, but we lost the battle in the Covenant swapping and a few other things. And Torghast ends up launching this just stay where it's not fun at all. Right? So unless they had a delay that meant they could fundamentally redesign things, Because like Shadowlands would have been an entirely different story. Unfortunately, the story probably wouldn't have been, but it would have been a different story if it launched maybe in Q1 of the next year, and they pulled that ripcord and did all those things. But no, it was that situation. People from the WoW team, I think mainly. I'll use Ian as it's it's almost like he's the figurehead, so it's like almost more. I don't want to say fair game, but
yeah, it's what makes sense. If you want to humanize the game and you need a human figure to do it, the game director's probably the fairest.
Yeah, and then equally you don't want to like splash damage on someone who's like they work in the game, but they're not a figurehead for the game. If you know what I mean. Like a lot of those arguments. Not as if him and Preach were having an argument, but, counterpoints or whatever. I think time did prove the WoW team's positions and most of those things to be rather, incorrect, right? But because we lost all those battles, like a Shadowlands that was delayed to the point where it would have been way more polished, like that would have been way better. But fundamentally, like the fantasy wasn't strong enough. I think the Covenants didn't resonate as well as the team thought that they would because they were like novel and new and exciting to the team. But I think for a lot of the players, they were like, quick little like Disneyland aesthetics. But they, it was like such a crazy new thing and this like take on undeath that felt, it's like Lost, right? You explain the mystery too much and then people just kind of get, bored and dissatisfied, right? So all of those core problems would have happened. So that's the tricky thing. It's like a Dragonflight that releases in 2022 with a really solid core design, but some bugs and some things being rough around the edges. Like the thing that should matter the most there is like the game at its core, and if that is better, then it'll be a better situation than it was for Shadowlands.
Yeah, so I think
it's a very long-winded way of putting things. Sorry.
Yeah, I think fundamentally the point is, and this is just something because I think people, whenever you're giving feedback to Blizzard and trying to drum up some sort of, hey, we disagree with your decision making here, Blizzard. It's like getting the resolution down super, super properly there makes more sense. I'm going to adjust me a little bit. There we go. Hello. Now I'm in a better place.
More dramatic.
Yeah, I'm in a better place. Wonderful. And I've completely lost my point. Yes, I was talking about the amount of time it takes where it's like, if you want to give them the correct feedback, you need it to be the correct resolution and kind of dig down deep enough so they go, okay, we understand the point. I think to me, that's less, this expansion should have more time. Why are you releasing it this early? Isn't really completely accurate. It's more, we haven't seen all of your decisions yet, and that's what's worrying people. That's what's causing. That's
super fair, actually. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
That's what's causing that emotional reaction of, we don't know, we can't trust this to be good because it's soon, but why does that matter? It matters because we haven't seen the alpha and beta. We haven't had those feedback loops.
And we are used to that shit.
Yeah, we're used to having the timeline's been, the beta timeline hasn't been substantially accelerated, as we'll get into with some like previous data stuff here, but it is just, we've been told to pre-order. We haven't seen the game outside of, here's a couple bits of footage of dragon riding and some interviews.
And I think that's important. Yeah. Because usually, now this is a bit weird because the BlizzCon started to have more and more things go on, right? So I remember, the BlizzCon for Legion, when you have the deep dive panel there, it really felt like a deep dive. And then those panels kind of got shorter and shorter. Remember, they kind of went from an hour to being like 45 minutes. Yeah. And they were definitely more tightly scripted or like tightly done. But you then get to the Shadowlands or the Dragonflight reveal, and it is so short. It has such a tiny amount of information. It doesn't really do much of a deep dive. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them could be that was all filmed a month and a half, maybe 2 months before it came out. That could be possible. And maybe they had less to show, or they, because they were doing it in advance, they were purposefully conservative in what they showed off because, well, that's just the sensible thing to do. Versus something where it's being done live on a stage where there's just a bit more agility, I suppose, right? It's just like, hey, go do a live presentation versus you have a scheduled shooting day. Right? And a production company handles this and blah, 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 blah. So I think that's a part of it. That's definitely a part of it. Yeah. Now, in their deep dive, they said they were better on schedule than normal, or maybe like they were further ahead than they would be normally at an announce. Yep. They just didn't show as much. Now, is that the case? Sort of tricky to say. We have seen them continually hire for roles. We're seeing the PvP team expand. We saw all of those job roles. I can't remember if that was last year, at what point last year that was, but the ones surrounding professions as an example. Oh, yeah. Right? Like, So we have seen the WoW team expand. Their production capacity should, in theory, be larger, assuming that it's not just replacing attrition. I think I remember, I don't know if it was Halinka, I remember somebody, they tweeted back to a response of somebody said, is this replacing people or is this the team growing? I think it was Halinka, tweeted back, the team is growing.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that. Another thing for Dragonflight. I've seen multiple different arguments and different sides of this, and to be honest, they're all reasonable because it's just, I mean, we don't fucking know, do we?
Haven't a clue.
I would make the contention that talents are a easier system to do than Covenant, than just all the shit we've had, right? Basically, I think that. And the reason why is the talents are large, but they're also tightly limited and specific. And almost all the things put into the talents are old. So they don't have to make new abilities in many cases, right? They don't have to do any of that work. What they need to do is balance them all, work out how you get all of them, and there's a hell of a lot of work in that for the talent trees. But it's not like they need to make a bunch of new abilities. I'm sure there'll be more, QA still needed for everything because obviously bugs happen and they happen often unexpected ways. But there's less moving parts, and it's all like moving parts in one engine in a way. Whereas if you look at the legendaries and the conduits and the soulbinds, those are, and of course the Covenant powers, those are like, they heavily impact each other, but they're also a bit separate from each other. They all have acquisition that's different.
And they all have different scaling power as well, which is the one thing that kind of impacted pretty hard in terms of, well, I don't know if they actually manifested, because I know a lot of them were fairly strong from the get-go, but like specific conduits completely knocking out entire like talent builds.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're a Frostmaid, sorry, you're thermal void the whole expansion. There's nothing you can do about that.
There's a very interesting thing here, just a comment in chat that to me highlights one of the issues of information spreading the internet. Sagmeyer said, Ian recently told Asmon that they thought Covenants were their biggest success in Shadowlands, and they want to carry the idea forward in Dragonflight. That's not true in the way you said it. So they didn't say that about the player power aspect of Covenants. When Ian said that, he was specifically referring to the way that you kind of have all the rewards laid out for you, and renown. It was like that side of things. It wasn't the side of Covenants that I think players really took issue with, which was the which is like all the player power stuff, and the way that they were kind of like mutually exclusive in that way, because the way that they're carrying Covenants forward into Dragonflight is basically just using the Covenant system to do mega reps, and they're not mutually exclusive. So you can just do them all at the same time. It's not like you join any of them. I mean, maybe, canonically you join them up to help them, but you don't join one at the expense of the other. So that's just a really good example of, I think what Ian said is not what you think he said in that case. But that's just one of the examples of like, whenever it's a dramatic situation, people are primed to take information in different ways.
Yeah, well, this is
because they've been pretty clear about the player power stuff, and that not being a move.
Isn't that the problem with information? This is getting a little bit meta. Isn't that the problem with like information density, where it's like, here's a word, what do Covenants mean to you? And they're going to mean different to a lot of people. Where to me, I think of the kind of player power lockout that kind of annoyed me and made different builds feel super kind of like you were supposed to do them, and there was this, and it was annoying, and then they renounced them. But for others, it'll just be like, oh yeah, the cool thing that I got the transmog from.
Yeah.
And then for the developers, that's going to be a completely different series of like what Covenants mean to them, and that's a whole thing.
That's the thing, because like whenever Ian talks, he talks from his perspective, and also with the context of the things that he said before, which does include admitting they got things wrong with player power and that kind of thing on Covenants. Now, to kind of steer things back to what we can actually expect for the game then, let's look at some facts.
Yes,
oh boy, so this is from
Disargaria on North/Row.
It
it's very nice.
Indeed.
It's very
all right,
nice.
So this is an expansion timeline comparison by patch duration. It's a pretty awesome visualization, isn't it? So, okay, right. we've got
First,
just trying to
yeah,
get a handle of our.
Yeah, so the first thing we can probably do is look at the beta lengths, because I think that's the important part, right?
Yes, and
That's
also this is somewhere where I want to come in and kind of help people understand some things that are not the way that they appear.
I've got a couple notes in there, which includes what you're about to talk about.
Good, yeah, because a lot of people are drawing incorrect conclusions from Legion, and I've seen some people take the non-external alpha for Warlords of Draenor, but then use that as the alpha start date, even though that's in a comparison that, generally speaking, seems to be compared to external alpha start dates.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get muddled about with all these numbers, which, I mean, is fair because it's kind of pretty complex.
Yeah, so also this doesn't include alphas because actually, there is a version that does include some alphas, but I elected not to show it because I said it was very difficult to get proper dates down because there was no, like, solid date recorded. It's all that kind of forum posts of when they started, stuff like that, so.
Yeah,
This is beta, which this is where most of your data is going to come from externally. So this is what people will be talking about, largely speaking.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that will stand out is like Legion is a decently long beta.
Yeah.
But as an example, like Battle for Azeroth, it had a decently chunky alpha, if I remember correctly, that like did include like a decent few zones and things. So it's tricky because that's like almost not really great in terms of being representative. Yeah, it's kind of tricky. To be honest, without external alpha, I don't really think it's that useful because at what point they decide to flip the switch and change the name it's not a particularly well-defined point. It's why I'd mostly think about it as, is this external testing or not?
Yeah, all I would sort of say is that projected beta doesn't look particularly smaller.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, Shadowlands had one of the largest betas. Well, obviously the alpha stuff for BFA makes it a bit weird, but looking at it, it's like Shadowlands had a pretty decent beta. The problem wasn't the length of it. The problem was the agility to make changes based on it.
Yeah.
And you could double that beta length and it probably wouldn't have made substantial difference because it's about the design
because ultimately the team disagreed with the players' feedback.
Yeah, so that means...
So, I mean, continually disagree with your beta testers, maybe something will happen. That won't be good.
Yeah, so it's like everything else had a relatively short beta, so that's a kind of argument that kind of falls away in terms of the beta timing being important, or the length of it. It's more about the ability to actually make change of that. Yeah. And to be fair, I would expect them to be quicker to make change now, which means that beta should be more effective anyway, even if it is the same length. You would imagine it's more effective overall.
Now, this is assuming the Dragonflight beta starts, what's this, 6/23?
Yeah,
and launches
which is yesterday, which
and has
happened.
a 4-week pre-patch.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are things here that make zero sense.
Yeah, this is like the worst case almost.
Yeah, so beta starting...
Well, that's kind of best case for beta.
Yesterday, obviously didn't happen,
didn't,
and it wouldn't be beta, it would be alpha. And then an expansion launch on the 31st makes absolutely no sense and will never happen.
Yeah,
so to be honest...
You take a couple, maybe 20, 30 days off the end of that.
Yeah, I'd basically say just don't look at this. Just don't look at the Dragonflight.
Yeah, that's entirely speculative.
Because it's never going to be that. For sure. It's not going to be that.
Yeah, so which leaves us with the other bit of data which comes from this, which is the amount of time every expansion's kind of been, along with the amount of patches, the content of patches, and that is kind of a marker for it. It's obviously not, because when they stop making content to move to expansion development, and how the team is split internally for that is a complete unknown to us. Generally speaking, we have a little bit of information from Warlords because we knew they just fucking jumped ship and went to make Legion, and that was apparent. But there's also like rumblings that Legion was in like a development before that, stuff like that. So it's a little bit awkward. But
yes, I believe the rumblings are that a lot of pre-production had already been done in Legion because they could have done either Legion or Warlords after MOP, which kind of makes sense because is it in patch? Is it 5.2 or 5.3 in the legendary campaign? Rathian basically says the Legion's coming, boys.
Yeah.
Which anyway. So
and they didn't.
And they didn't.
Yep.
Now the thing in Legion testing, right? You're going to see people say that it was so extremely long, and then you're going to think, "Wow, Legion was an incredible expansion." It was this. Here's the thing: Legion late in that year, and I remember this date quite vividly because I saw the thing in MMO Champion while I was out at the bar. I then said, sorry, I have to go, and I ran from Northern Lights back to Stranmillis.
Jesus Christ.
Just brisk little jog.
That's some
So yeah, I did that. I literally ran back home to start covering it, and I forget what date it was, but it was like winter 2013. Dates are hard. It was after the BlizzCon where it was announced anyway.
Did you say for the... Were we talking about the Legion?
Sorry,
build?
no.
I was like, what the hell?
That's a WOD date. No, it was like winter 2015.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was like that alpha happened, and it was like just Demon Hunter stuff for a while. So you kind of went in, played the alpha, not that much happened. And then they took the thing down for a while, and then they put it back up. So there's actually quite a lot of dead time and not really complete testing. Now, it did have extensive testing. They said they felt they really needed that because of the very extensive class changes that were made for the expansion.
And even despite all that extensive testing, no one picked up on Legendary acquisition being a complete fucking hellscape nightmare.
Oh no, we all talked about it.
Yeah, no one at Blizzard picked up on it.
Yeah,
much like with Confidence.
No, it was similar for players. I remember making a video that said, hey, this is fucking daft. This whole thing for legendaries, this is so demotivating. What the hell? And I got like, I don't know, 75% likes. And by the way, to get 25% dislikes or 20% dislikes on a YouTube video is a complete failure. So it was at that stage, I think people were totally overwhelmed by the bing bing wahoos of, ooh, Titan Forging and ooh, Legos are dropping. That I kind of come in, I'm like, I'm going to criticize this.
Shut down,
Joe, my solution basically was, it was just like, hey, yo, let's do glyphs again. How about we unlock the powers?
Yeah.
Because it's not like the individual Legos were even that cool looking or anything anyway. Oh well, time proved us right in that one.
Absolutely.